Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today I am all tied up in knots. And not just any kind of knot, a very specific kind of knot, a Gordian knot. And that's because there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of meaning behind that knot. And the mythology of it, well, it's a great story. And it's also the inspiration for my latest collection over at StencilGirl Products. So we have got this 6x6 stencil called Entangled. Then we have got this 9x12. This is called Intertwined. Then we have Twisted here. And the collection finishes off with a stencil of quotes here called All Tied Up. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made these papers, what the absolute fastest way to stencil with paint is, why watercolors are so forgiving, and then at the end of the video, you're going to see some other things that I've created with these stencils, as well as the gel print that went horribly wrong. I mean, it really did not go as planned. And well, anyway, it's all waiting for you here in this video. Because I'm an impatient person, I like to do things quickly. And when it comes to stenciling, the quickest way to do it with acrylic paint is using a gel plate. So here I've got that layer of paint, there's no R in paint, that I'm spreading around here. And then I'm simply going to put the stencil on top of it and take a print. And this also allows me to do multiples. This is a very fast way to do a lot of prints as well. So I've got the stencil on there. Now I'm going to take some book text and I'm going to gently press the paper down. Really, all I'm trying to make sure is that paper is getting to all the nooks and crannies, but this one feels a little weird to me. And that's because it's actually 2 pieces of paper. You really only need a one at a time for this. Now, you'll notice I'm using my fingertip here. That's so that I can just gently get the paper around the stencil. This is an extremely forgiving process, so don't feel like you have to get anything just perfect. So as I lift this print up, the lines aren't quite as crisp as what I expected, and that's because I was a little heavy-handed with the paint. So that's what it looks like when you've got a lot of paint. Well, no problem. I'm just going to take another print. I'm going to take that brayer and just smooth the paint around, and I'm going to put the stencil back on here. But notice I'm putting the painty side down. So the top of the stencil, it has no paint on it. So that means I can repeat this over and over again, especially if I want to make a whole bunch of prints using this technique at once. Now I am using that fingertip there going over the paper because that gently gets the paper into any of the smaller areas on the stencil. So if you've got a more intricate stencil, you're going to want to use your fingertip to really make sure that paper gets into any of the nooks and crannies on there. And so when I lift this print up, you're going to notice that it's a little bit crisper than that first one that I did. And that's because there was just a little less paint on it. Now, at any point when you lift up the stencil, if you like what you see, you can absolutely take a print with it. But I'm going to spread that paint around one more time. So that means there's just a little bit less paint on here because I haven't actually added any more paint from the tube since I started. It's just the paint that's on the brayer and then evening out any paint that's on the plate. And that's why there's a little less paint with each print that I'm taking here. Now this gel plate is acting kind of like an ink pad for me as I'm loading it up with paint. So when it seems to run low or it gets too dry, then I would add some more paint from the tube onto it and continue on with this process. Now I did this in all the colors of the rainbow, but no matter what color I'm using, the technique is exactly the same. So now that you know how it works, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do it in every color of the rainbow. But as soon as I take this print, I'm going to show you the most forgiving and colorful way to color in those Gordian knots. Watercolors are so forgiving when you're coloring these in. Because if you go just a little over the line, because watercolors are translucent, it doesn't show up quite as much. And if it bothers you if you go over the line, all you have to do is clean out your brush, put some fresh water on it, and then go over any of those areas where you've gone over the line, and they magically disappear. Another thing that's really great about watercolors is the variation that you can get in the color. So I'm going into one single color here in orange, but yet as I'm coloring it in, some areas are lighter and some areas are darker. And is that happening because I'm a master of watercolors? No, not at all. You do not have to even know much about watercolors to be able to do this. This variation that you're seeing is happening because of where I'm putting that brush into the watercolors. If I'm really digging in there and getting lots and lots of the pigment, it's going to be a little bit brighter. And if I've got more water in it, it's going to have a softer look to it. The other thing is I might go over an area 2 or 3 times. The more you go over it, the more the color builds up there. And did you catch what just happened there? Yep, I went outside the lines with the orange, and all I did was use my finger to kind of wipe it up. If I catch it right away and it's still wet, that's really all you have to do. But even if it's dried, you can simply take a clean, wet brush and go over it, and it'll reactivate it, and then you can wipe it up. This really is extremely forgiving. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that a Gordian knot was a special kind of knot, and that has to do with the mythology behind it. You see, there was an oracle that foretold that a person who unraveled this knot that nobody could untie would rule all of Asia. And the reason why I say nobody could untie it is because it went for hundreds and hundreds of years of nobody being able to untie this knot. They couldn't find where it started, they couldn't find where it ended, nobody could do it. That is until Alexander the Great came along. And he tried to untie it and he couldn't find the beginning or the end and he wasn't making any progress. So then he decided to untie it a different way. He took his sword and he simply cut the knot. And then the oracle was right. He did go on to rule Asia. So what about the symbolism? What then does the Gordian knot mean? Well, I'm going to go into detail about that while I'm working on the next paper because I'm just about finished up here with the orange. Now this one is just done with one color, but on the next paper, you're going to see how I do it with multiple colors on there. In the top left of the screen, you can see how I've done solid colors on other ones of these. I've got the purple and yellow, the pink and the turquoise, the blue and the orange up there. And this was supposed to be purple and orange. I was going to do the entire thing in purple, but I wasn't really liking it. And even when I put a little bit more purple on there, I didn't like it anymore. And so that's why I decided to make this one a multicolor, because the purple just wasn't giving me the feeling that I wanted with it. So when you're doing this, if you're one where you're not completely in love with how it's looking with one color, try adding in some other colors. So now I've brought in a pink, a really bright pink that I'm putting here. And after adding that one, I realized I think I want to add a third color to this. But when I use that third color, you're going to see that I go way outside the lines. And when I tried to just wipe it up with my finger, that didn't do it. So I dipped my finger in water, got it nice and wet, and then simply wiped it up with a clean towel. As I'm adding the teal on here, when I get near the pink, I'm actually going over the pink. I want them to not just touch each other, but overlap. That way they'll have a little bit of that flowing into each other look. As I'm doing this, there are a couple of spots where it has a little bit of a harder look where it doesn't quite flow and blend together as nicely as I want. So anytime that happens to me, I simply grab some more watercolor and layer some more of it on there to let those colors play around. Because you are going to have all these colors touching each other, if you want the colors to stay vibrant as opposed to getting a little bit more of that gray look or heading into the browns, stay within one color family. What I'm basically staying in here is the purple, the red, and the blue. And that way, anytime those colors run together, they touch each other, they're not going to make a muddy color. Two other color families are the green, yellow, blue family, as well as the red, yellow, orange family. And actually, that one's sounding very enticing to me, so let's do another paper using those colors. Same technique as I used on the last one, it's just a different set of colors. Well, let's go back and talk about the symbolism of the Gordian knot. I mean, after all, a Gordian knot is a knot that is so complex. There's no beginning, there's no end. The more you try and untangle it, the tighter it seems to get. It's an insurmountable challenge, or at least that's the way it looks. Because if you come up with a creative solution, you can actually untangle that knot. Creativity, that's the first piece of symbolism for me with Gordian knots. And the second piece of symbolism for me is about breaking the rules. So the big question is what rules did Alexander break? The oracle declared that any man who could unravel its elaborate knots was destined to become the ruler of all of Asia. It wasn't like there was an 82-page terms of service that had all these details broken out. It just simply said, whoever unraveled it. Now, for the hundreds of years where people had been trying to untie that knot, where they've been trying to loosen it, find the beginning or find the end to untangle it, the rule that it had to be untied, that was one that they created. It wasn't actually in the rules or the terms of service from the oracle. those were created by the individuals. Now, Alexander chose not to follow those rules, not accept those rules, or you could say break those rules. And that's why he was able to unravel that knot with his sword. The symbolism of breaking the rules reminds me to question the rules that I'm following. I mean, do I have to do it that way? Is that really a rule? Or is that something that I've kind of put together in my head and created a rule for it that doesn't have to be there, and hence something I can easily break? The Gordian knot collection, as well as all of the stencils I've designed, are available over at StencilGirlProducts.com. And yep, I'll have a link down below for you. Something else that I'll have down below for you is the full supply list of everything that I've been using in this video. And when it comes to the watercolors here, there's actually several different brands of them that I'm using because I picked the ones that I play with based on the color that I like. Not so much the brand, but the color. And that tray that they're in, that is a tray that comes completely empty, and then you can fill it with any of the watercolors that you have. So I've custom made that palette of ones that I like to play with. And naturally, whatever watercolors that you have, the ones that you like playing with, you can absolutely do this technique. Or really with just about any art supply that you want to play with, you can color those lines in from colored pencils, markers, whatever it is you like to use. All of the papers that I've made in this video are using the 9x12 Gordian knots, but here on the right, you've got an idea of what size the 6x6 Gordian knot is using the same technique. Now here are some other ways I've been playing with the Gordian knot stencils. By coloring in the large areas with color, it creates kind of a stained glass look. For this print, I went for a smaller area, creating stripes of color all throughout that Gordian knot. Now this print was a fail. This was not the look I was going for. I wanted to crisply and cleanly see exactly where that stencil was, and this technique did not work at all. Even though this print was a failure in one way, I mean, this thing did not turn out the way it was supposed to. It was also a win in another, because this may not have been the look I was going for, but I absolutely love the abstract feeling that it created. What I've shared with you in this video is just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with the stencil. And if you're looking for more ideas, if you want to understand stencils more deeply, if you want to get more out of the stencils that you have, then check out my online workshop, The Joy of Stenciling. You can find all the details over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com. Well, thanks so much for being a part of today's play. If you've had fun, if you've enjoyed yourself, I'd so appreciate it if you gave the video a thumbs up. And of course, if you know somebody who you think would enjoy this, share the video with them so they can join in the fun too. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.